Greetings. I am Emily Carter. Today, I wish to recount a haunting event from my life that evokes a profound sense of regret and self-blame. I regret going through this experience, but as we all know, life is never perfect. This narrative commenced many years prior. At the age of 18, residing with my family in the enchanting metropolis of London, a locale replete with allure yet harboring its own shadows, I believed I had everything. My family is thriving, and both of my parents are highly accomplished. Please subscribe to my channel to enable me to share more captivating, genuine stories like this one. Additionally, ensure you watch this video in its entirety and like it, as the narrative promises to be exceptionally intriguing. Kindly click the like button to express your support. Michael, my father, is busy with his business. My father is a businessman, and my mother, Elizabeth, is an interior designer with exceptional taste. Despite their demanding occupations, my parents consistently prioritized spending time with me and my two older brothers, Ethan and Lucas, who are 2 years my senior. They are both exceptionally attractive and captivating. I have always taken pride in having brothers such as these. My parents indulged me as the youngest, ensuring I lacked neither financial possessions nor affection. However, I must admit that even though their love was strong, it was nothing compared to the affection I received from Ethan and Lucas. They were not merely my brothers, but also my guardians and companions, consistently present to oversee and nurture me. The distinguishing factor of their affection, in contrast to my parents, was their consistent demonstration of concern through gestures and deeds. The primary focus of their affection was provision. Ethan and Lucas provided me with a sense of comfort that my parents sometimes could not. They possessed an innate ability to perceive my emotional state, even in silence. They were my primary confidants, offering a judgment-free space for conversation. During my childhood, whenever I faced bullying or distress at school, it was Ethan and Lucas who defended me. I recall an incident when my classmates ridiculed my dress, leaving me in tears. Both brothers not only consoled me, but also intervened at the school to rectify the situation. They refrained from resorting to violence. Instead, their incisive words and composed demeanor ensured that the bullies never dared to harm me again. They were heroes, perpetually prepared to support me anytime I required assistance. Remember the evenings when the whole family gathered, but I always preferred to sit between Ethan and Lucas. They would give me tight hugs, often joking over who would sit next to me. They always teased that I was their little princess and that it was their duty to protect me forever. Over time, I began to feel that their love was unlike anyone else's in the family. They were also the first ones to help me through the awkward years of adolescence. When I started feeling insecure about my looks, Lucas spent time teaching me how to apply makeup, reminding me that I was beautiful, just the way I was. Ethan helped me pick out clothes, calling me the cutest little sister in the world. They made me feel special and loved without conditions in my eyes. My brothers weren't just family. They were my emotional anchor when my parents were busy with work. Ethan and Lucas were the ones who made sure I was never alone. They took me to school, helped me with my homework, and kept me company. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, and I would knock on their doors. They'd always welcome me, telling me funny stories, or just sitting with me until I fell asleep. Those small gestures made me believe that their love for me was deeper than what I received from my parents. But that love, the love I thought was pure, became the source of my greatest regret. It's a story that would take more time to explain. I'm not sure if anyone will truly understand, but everything that happened when I was 18 completely changed my life. When I found the courage, I'll share the rest of that memory with you. I remember everything so clearly as the youngest in the family. I often did silly things without fear of punishment. At times, I would leap into their laps. I would sometimes jump into their laps or sit next to them as if it were a common occurrence. My siblings, Ethan and Lucas, were also my closest friends and my most comfortable. On a sunny summer afternoon, I exited my bedroom. Sunlight poured through the huge window, saturating the living area with a tranquil ambiance. Ethan and Lucas sat on the sofa, engrossed in a television program. I was unaware of their viewing content, yet both appeared entirely engrossed. I approached, distractedly scratching my eyes. I remained silent and approached stealthily. As I drew near, I observed that neither of them had detected my presence. Nevertheless, I smiled. I playfully leaped onto the sofa and settled onto both of their laps. Ethan was startled and leaped, prompting laughter from Lucas. Inquiring, "Little sister, what are you engaged in?" I merely chuckled, remained silent, and comfortably positioned myself on their laps, putting my head on Ethan's shoulder. "Why are both of you observing so intently?" I inquired. However, when I glanced at the television screen, they did not respond promptly, and I discerned that they were watching a romantic film. At that moment, the film attained its conclusion, featuring an emotional scene in which the characters embraced fervently before sharing a kiss. Upon observing my gaze fixed on the television, Ethan and Lucas swiftly exhibited discomfort, with Lucas managing a smirk. Uncomfortably shielding my eyes, I remarked, "Do not observe, Grace. This is not a film suitable for children." I chuckled, extricating myself from his hold. I am no longer a child. I am 18 years old. Despite my playful tone, I found myself deeply engrossed in my thoughts. Despite his efforts to obscure my vision, I endeavored to glimpse between Lucas's fingers, continuing to chuckle as I taunted them. At that point, I instinctively repositioned my hand to maintain my equilibrium on Lucas's leg. I am uncertain whether it was deliberate, but my hand inadvertently grazed an object in his pocket. The touch, firm and warm, instantly accelerated my heartbeat. I withdrew my fingers abruptly, panic surging in my chest. I was unable to meet the gaze of Lucas or Ethan, overwhelmed by a profound sense of humiliation. I apologized for my rapid stammering. I hurried to my room, slammed the door shut, and leaned against it, my heart racing as if I had committed an offense. Seated on my bed, I was unable to dispel the thought of the recent events. Was I overanalyzing it, or was it an accident? The feeling from Lucas's pocket lingered in my thoughts, causing my face to redden. I was uncertain in my thoughts, yet the shame was pervasive. I contemplated whether Ethan and Lucas would merely dismiss the incident. However, I was unable to cease ruminating on the moment, not due to having touched something inappropriate, but because I had inadvertently transgressed a boundary. It was the inaugural instance I saw that the barrier between us, which I had perpetually considered to be inviolable, was more tenuous than I had anticipated. Later that evening, after sequestering myself in my room for some time, I resolved to descend. I was famished. I was aware that my family was probably awaiting my return, although I still felt a sense of embarrassment from earlier. Uncertain if Ethan and Lucas were contemplating the incident, I reassured myself that it might not be as grave as I presumed. Perhaps they had overlooked it. I discreetly opened my door and stealthily traversed the hallway, attempting to evade eye contact with them. Upon approaching the living room, I halted to listen. It appeared vacant, and I exhaled in relief. I presumed they were in the kitchen or another location. Upon entering the living room, I was astonished to discover it entirely vacant. How peculiar, I contemplated. I paused near the sofa where I had previously sat while attempting to determine the current channel. I perceived auditory stimuli. Lucas's voice resonated behind me, asking, "What? Are you attending to Grace?" This startled me. Ethan laughed heartily, exclaiming, "You resemble a thief." I uttered these words in shock, turning around to see both of them standing there. The abruptness of their emergence caused my heart to cease, and we all startled simultaneously. Lucas and Ethan chuckled as I stood there, both surprised and delighted, clutching my chest. "You both frightened me immensely," I declared, attempting to appear frustrated, yet unable to suppress my laughter. "What is your perspective?" "It appears you are engaged in some scheme," shady Ethan remarked teasingly. Raising his eyebrows, Lucas gently rubbed my head and inquired, "You are not intending to consume something, are you?" I joined in the laughter. The initial uneasiness seems to dissipate in their presence. I thought what I touched must not have been as I thought because Ethan and Lucas were laughing. The realization provided me with some solace, and I endeavored to behave as if nothing had transpired. I was merely inquiring whether anyone was present, I stated, attempting to divert the topic. "What are you both doing behind me? Are you attempting to intimidate me?" Ethan inquired, feigning seriousness. "I intended to startle you slightly, but I did not anticipate your reaction, Lucas," accompanied by a laugh. "Who would have anticipated your sudden leap? Your expression was invaluable." We all erupted in laughter. The stress dissipated at that instant. Lucas placed his hand on my shoulder and stated, "Very well, let us proceed to dine. The entire family is awaiting your arrival." I acquiesced. Smiling, she followed them into the kitchen where the entire family had assembled. My parents beamed with warmth at seeing me. I took a seat at the table. Experiencing tranquility under the warm illumination over supper, the dialogue was replete with laughter. My parents discussed their professions, while Ethan and Lucas sometimes jested with playful humor. I participated, and the initial sensations of humiliation appeared to dissipate. Subsequent to dinner, I assisted my mother in washing the dishes and then proceeded to my room to prepare myself for bed. As I reclined in bed that night, I reflected on the afternoon's events, albeit still feeling somewhat embarrassed about what transpired. I no longer experienced anxiety. I smiled inwardly, assuring myself that all would be well. Ethan and Lucas remained the finest brothers I could ever wish for, and I succumbed to slumber. Serenely assured that it was all in the past, I realized that my room was not isolated. Theirs was merely separated by a flimsy wall, allowing even the faintest sounds, whether from a film or music, to permeate through effortlessly. One morning, I, recognized for my propensity to sleep in, awoke at 7 a.m. At an typically early hour, I initially believed I had awakened from an unrecallable dream, or perhaps the sunshine filtering through the curtains had startled me. However, as I became more alert, I discerned a strange sound emanating from the adjacent room. My room was situated between Ethan's and Lucas's. The house was constructed in a classic manner with thin walls, allowing sounds from loud music or television to permeate into adjacent rooms. I was accustomed to hearing Anne and Lucas conversing or engaging in activities, but this morning, the sound was distinct. It was not loud, yet it was distinct enough to get my attention. Initially, I believed they were merely seeing an action film. After a few minutes, I sensed something was amiss. The sounds deviated from the typical noise of a film, manifesting as intermittent variations, sometimes slow, sometimes rapid. My heart raced, and a disconcerting thought ignited a flush on my face. I was reluctant to accept it, yet as the sounds intensified, I realized they were neither music nor ordinary conversation, but rather a series of rapid, sensual noises interspersed with heavy breathing. I endeavored to dismiss my thoughts, but the more I listened, the more convinced I became. I could not overlook the likelihood that Ethan and Lucas were viewing something of an adult nature. A wave of embarrassment engulfed me, and I questioned why I was awake to witness this. My heart raced to the point of potential rupture, and my body felt as though it were engulfed in flames. I raised my hands to shield my face, attempting to expel the inappropriate ideas from my mind. I reminded myself that this was private. However, it became increasingly peculiar to hear those sounds emanating from their room. We had always maintained a strong relationship, and I never anticipated finding myself in such a predicament. I wished to cease hearing it, yet the sounds clung to me, intensifying in volume. I sprang from bed and discreetly opened my door. Uncertain of my course of action, the unease in my chest rendered it untenable to remain stationary, prompting me to stroll quietly. Proceeding along the corridor with minimal noise, I approached their door, where the sounds were so distinct that it seemed the walls no longer divided us. I remained stationary at the door, experiencing embarrassment and confusion. My heart raced, and my thoughts were disordered. I was aware of this. It was probably a universal feeling. However, hearing it from Ethan and Lucas's room was distinct. I was unaware. I hesitated and bit my lip. I contemplated whether to retreat or remain, pressing my ear against the door while attempting to regulate my breathing, although the loudness obliterated any logical thinking. A portion of me desired to retreat, yet another half was captivated, unable to disengage from the sounds. Unexpectedly, the door swung open, and I recoiled in astonishment. Lucas stood there, astonished, as if he had been arrested in an inappropriate act, immobilized and uncertain. What should be articulated? We gazed at one another, in silence for what seemed like an eternity. The silence was dense and oppressive. Struggling to breathe, Lucas cleared his throat and attempted to alleviate the stress. "Grace, what are you now engaged in?" His voice trembled as he stood there. Embarrassed and evidently struggling to maintain composure, he scratched the back of his head while avoiding my look. Lucas's visage was suffused with humiliation. I was equally affected. My heart raced, and my entire body felt overheated. I lowered my head, avoiding his eyes, and murmured, "Ah, I was just passing by." My words were weak, but they were the only ones I could muster in the moment. Then the sound inside the room stopped. Abruptly, and Ethan walked out from behind Lucas's face, mirrored Lucas's expression, red and full of awkwardness. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away, unable to look either of us in the eye. We all stood there, unsure of what to say. The tension between us was thick, and it seemed like no one knew how to break. I gave a nervous smile, running my hand through my hair in an attempt to hide my discomfort. "I was just passing," I repeated, my voice trembling. "Slightly nothing. I'm leaving." I turned quickly and rushed back to my room, wanting to escape the awkward situation as fast as I could. I could feel their eyes on me as I left, though I didn't look back. When I reached my room, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. My heart was still racing, and I felt like I'd just been caught in something I shouldn't have witnessed. Embarrassment lingered in my chest, and I couldn't stop thinking about the moment the way Lucas and Ethan looked at me, and the awkward silence that followed. It all replayed in my mind over and over. I tried to push the negative thoughts away, but the more I tried, the stronger they became. I kept telling myself that this was just an unexpected situation, something no one wanted to happen. but I couldn't help but wonder if it had changed things forever between us. Short while later, there was a knock on my door. My heart sank, and I guessed it wasn't my parents because they usually just came in when they needed me and could only be Ethan or Lucas. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves before. Opening the door, Lucas stood there, looking just as embarrassed as before. He avoided my gaze, his hands fidgeting awkwardly. "Grace, I'm really sorry about what happened earlier," he said in his soft voice. "It's not what you think we were. Just watching a movie and maybe the timing wasn't right." I stood there for a moment. Hesitating, I could see the uncertainty in Lucas's eyes. Then Ethan stepped into the doorway behind him. He looked just as uncomfortable, his eyes darting between me and Lucas, trying to find the right words. No one said anything for a few moments. The silence was thick again, and I knew we were all trying to figure out how to move past this. I realized that if this awkwardness continued, it would only make things worse, so I decided to break the silence. I smiled awkwardly, trying to act casual despite the tension. "Come on, I didn't mean it," I said. "Don't look so." Tense. "I was just passing by, really." Ethan and Lucas exchanged a glance as if silently communicating. After a brief pause, Lucas let out a sigh, his smile returning slightly. "Really, Grace, you're okay. With this, you're not uncomfortable." I quickly nodded, trying to reassure them. "Both, yeah, I'm fine. Honestly, I think. We're all just a little awkward about it." Then to make things easier, I suggested, "How about the three of us sit down and talk? Maybe it'll help us clear the air." Both Ethan and Lucas seemed surprised by my offer, but after a moment of hesitation, they both agreed. We went into my room, and I sat down on the bed. I decided to make a joke to ease the tension. I looked at Ethan and teased, "So, the movie was so good, you both forgot." About time, Ethan laughed awkwardly and covered his face with his hands. "Come on. Grace, stop teasing me. It's just that we didn't expect you to hear, really." I raised my eyebrows playfully. "I thought you guys turned it up so I could hear it." Both laughed, and the awkwardness melted away. After a while, my curiosity got the best of me, and I glanced at Ethan and Lucas, wondering if I should say what had crossed my mind. After a brief moment of hesitation, I gathered the courage to speak. "How about we try something like in the movie?" The words came out before I could stop myself. I wasn't sure how they would react, but I felt a surge of curiosity that I couldn't ignore Ethan, and Lucas looked at me in surprise. "Are you serious?" Lucas asked, his voice full of confusion. I nodded, trying to keep my expression serious. "I was just curious. It wouldn't hurt to try, right?" I said softly, not daring to look at them directly. "No way," Ethan replied, immediately shaking his head firmly. They both turned away, clearly uncomfortable, but I wasn't ready to give up. I squeezed both of their hands to reassure them and myself. "Just try it once. I want to know what it feels like." Like after a long silence, Lucas sighed and finally spoke, "Okay, but just this once, and we keep it a secret." No one can know. His voice was low, emphasizing the importance of the boundaries of the room was quiet except for our breathing. My heart raced as we began each movement, careful, yet full of intensity. I couldn't tell how much time had passed, but it felt like everything in the world had faded away, leaving only us when it was over. The sunlight streamed through the room, and there was a peaceful silence. We didn't speak. We just lay next to each other, breathing evenly. Tension that I had feared was gone was replaced by an even deeper connection. We headed to the kitchen together to prepare lunch, and everything felt unexpectedly natural, like nothing had happened, but deep down I knew that the boundary between us had shifted as we sat down to eat. Lucas smiled at me and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded, returning the smile. "I'm fine. and I think I love you both even more now." Blushed at my words, but they just held my hand, smiling at me with warmth and affection. "You too," they said, and so we continued our meal knowing that our relationship had changed. But there was no regret, only a deeper bond, one that would remain unspoken but clear between us from that day on. Everything felt different, but in a subtle way, our relationship, once pure and simple, had now crossed an invisible line. The intimacy we shared before had evolved into something more complex every time we looked into each other's eyes. There was a new understanding, a deeper connection that hadn't been there before. We didn't talk about it, but we knew the unspoken bond was there, shifting the dynamics between us in ways couldn't easily explain. But while the change in our relationship was undeniably deep down, I knew it wasn't right what we had done. The boundary we had crossed was wrong. We had given in to youthful curiosity, and while it brought us closer in some ways, it also left a mark on my conscience. I couldn't ignore the fact that we had broken some fundamental rules. Even if it was unintentional, our actions had altered the way I saw the world, and it weighed heavily on me. Sometimes I still feel the anxiety creeping in when I think back to that moment. The awkwardness hasn't completely disappeared whenever I look at Ethan or Lucas. I can sense the change in the air, an unspoken tension that lingers just beneath the surface. We never talked about what happened again, almost as if it were a silent agreement to forget it and move forward, but the way they treat me now is different. They're more careful and gentler in their actions, as though they're afraid to hurt me, even though I know they love me. As for me, I can't help but feel my heart race every time I meet their eyes. There's a mixture of excitement and anxiety, a feeling I've never had before the curiosity of youth led us down this path, one that was filled with emotions we weren't ready to handle. Our connection is stronger, but it's also more complicated, and I know deep down, things will never be the same. Again, looking back, I realize how impulsive and immature I was. Our actions, guided by curiosity and emotion, I crossed a line that should never have been crossed. I don't regret it, but I also can't deny the lingering feeling of guilt and confusion. It haunts me, reminding me that curiosity can sometimes lead us down dangerous paths. We may not have intended for things to happen the way they did, but they did, and now we're left to deal with the consequences. Through this experience, I've learned an important lesson. Curiosity, while natural, is not always worth satisfying, especially when it threatens the integrity of relationships and the boundaries that protect us. Life's boundaries aren't there to restrict us. They exist to protect us from making decisions. We may regret sometimes holding back, and staying grounded is the best choice. So to anyone reading this, I want to offer a piece of advice. Don't let temporary curiosity lead you into making decisions that could ruin the relationships you hold dear. Before acting on strong emotions, stop and think about the long-term consequences. Emotions, especially strong ones, are often fleeting, but the consequences, they cherish the things that can last a lifetime. Relationships you have, and respect the boundaries that come with them. True love, the kind that lasts, doesn't require impulsive actions to prove its strength. It's built on trust and respect, understanding and responsibility. That's the most important lesson I've learned.